Hey guys, what's up? RossDunneIE. And it's another warm one today, just like it was yesterday. Toasty motherfuckers. So I've been knocking around with this idea in my head for quite some time about identity politics, and I feel like both the feminist and the LGBT community are very much at risk. Like a door has been left open, a window sits unlatched, and both of their houses have been broken into by a parasitic entity that they've mistaken for a friendly and helpful dog. And this parasite is identity politics. Now, I've discussed identity politics before, but from different perspectives, and now I want to talk about how I feel it's doing more harm than good in the feminist and LGBT community. I mean, unfortunately for both parties, identity politics are circles which intersect both feminism and LGBT issues. I mean, after all, in order to accommodate change, you have to be willing to place necessary labels on problems and identify yourself against these problems. Ideally, this would kind of be as far as we really needed to go. And both feminism and the advancement of LGBT rights are, in my opinion, inherently noble causes, and the roots of their arguments are hardly hard to provide any sort of real counterpoint to, but the ramblings of identity politics and its primary proponents definitely put dents in the armors of these movements. Identity politics can advance the narratives of people who they even agree with, or actively attempt to mitigate the narratives of people they disagree with, because they themselves lack any structured narrative that can even cohesively agree on one viewpoint. I think that identity politics is a fundamental expression of nonsensical and oftentimes paradoxical relativism. I mean, they despise labels and then they batch produce their own, which they simply approve of. I mean, these are kids who went to Sociology 101, absorbed everything, and then skipped Psychology 101 for reasons I can't fucking comprehend. I mean, these are swarm thinkers. I mean, they're individuals unable to consider singular thoughts or the individual experiences of others. I mean, nowhere else has identity politics spread its sort of poisonous relativistic bile than in the transgender community. This is because transgender people deal with the concepts of gender identity on an almost daily basis, and I suppose it's a natural fit for people who are transgender to be concerned and highly familiar with identity politics. But where trans people struggle to fit in a world full of gender binaries, identity politics would splay that world into an endless fractal map of identities, and then coerce others into obeying in their fictitious nonsense in an effort to what? I can't even answer that. I've never observed an end goal that identity politics wants to achieve. I've certainly been made aware of its enemies, however. The cis, the heteronormative, the white, identity politics. It's full of criticisms, but it provides very few answers. Perhaps more insipid than anything else is that identity politics hides in the reeds or the tall grasses behind the bulwark of LGBT and feminist issues. And these two groups defend them whilst they provide nothing in return other than an echo chamber of nonsensical discourse in which individuals gather around a table and don't discuss anything of substance, but rather they endlessly spout words which describe the relativistic terms which they would prefer to apply to themselves. This is a profoundly narcissistic act of self-inflation and self-reinforcement which achieves virtually nothing and offers no growth. And at best it helps to encourage neurotic personalities to be proud and extroverted about their inherently broken worldviews. And that's just what people who participate in identity politics are. Profoundly narcissistic. Defensive about their narcissism and their broken moral pendulums. I mean, places like LiveJournal at the turn of the century were fertile soil for these sorts of souls to grow, but few knew that they'd flower into the horrific monsters whose only goal was to police the language of others and engage in discourse which offers virtually nothing to society. They often fancy themselves creative souls, yet they create nothing but arbitrary social complexity, they produce no art, they create no paradigm shifts, they simply observe. They are critics without critical reasoning. It's political correctness gone mad is a term often used by the bigoted in an attempt to defend their bigotry. Usually when someone chimes in with this gem, you're about to roll your eyes or you've already rolled them. However, the vanguard of words and thoughts that identity politics holds itself up to be would make even the Daily Mail blush with glee, as it stumbled upon a monstrous goldmine of millennial children actively attempting to censor each other's language, not for the consideration of disenfranchised peoples, who genuinely should be considered, but rather for their own emotional well-being in defense of imaginary landscapes and enemies they've crafted in their minds. The entire world of active attempts to censor and exercise moral authority over others is easily available online in places like Tumblr and in various subreddits on Reddit. This goes far beyond pointing out racism and inherently sexist structures, but attempts to criticize and demonize entire methods of thinking which are not necessarily inherently dangerous to society, but merely inconvenient to the worldview and requires them and their meaningless considerations to act as a central star around which the whole solar system of society must orbit. Ultimately, people who practice identity politics to an extreme degree beyond the legitimate struggles of the LGBT community, certain corners of feminism, and ethnic minority communities are often simply privileged white children, seeking to find victimhood where there truly isn't any, or worse yet, are profoundly sociopathic whiners hell-bent on making sure that everyone around them knows that they exist and are catering to them at all times. We were all teenagers on the internet once. For me, it was nearly a decade ago. And I also like to sit on my soapbox and spout as much nonsense as everyone else. But hopefully I've grown up just a little bit. And maybe it's time for these guys to grow up as well. I'm RossDunneIE. Peace.